everyone, welcome to MetaShift. This is a new series I'm starting where I go over the changes that are happening in the PvE meta, specifically raids, although I will touch fractals if that happens. Guilds and players are always experimenting with new builds and team comps, and while some of the ideas are kind of just tried once and then given up on, others will survive to become part of the meta. I wanted the series to discuss some of the experiments that seem to be catching on with the raid community. The first one I want to touch on is the decline of the Ellie meta. The Elementalist was pretty much the undisputed king of raid DPS until recently. The question wasn't if you'd bring an Ellie, it was how many and what weapons would they use. After the nerfs to Ellie, the groups have been slowly phasing out Ellies from their comps if they've noticed their reduced effectiveness compared to other options. Dagger Warhorn Fresh Air Ellie is virtually gone from the meta, and it really only existed before to fight small hitbox bosses or bosses who moved a lot. But the community has observed that Thief does that same exact job significantly better now. Staff Ellie is still strong against big hitboxes, but now the gap isn't big enough with other options to bring Staff Ellie when other options also provide additional utility that you might want. For example, Quantify recently posted a Gorseval speed kill record using no Staff Ellie, despite the big hitbox, because they wanted the Fury that a Sword Scepter Guardian can provide more than they wanted a tiny bit of personal DPS from the Ellie. The last boss where Staff Ellie is still the king is the Keep construct because of Tempest defense. Adding another 20% damage mod onto an Ellie against a large hitbox is enough to push it back to the top, unless the functionality is changed to the KC debuff. It is likely that we will continue to see Ellies played there pretty consistently. The coolest change has been Xerath, where many groups valued Ellie for the ability to take out the Bloodstone fragments at range without getting Madness stacks. What a lot of teams discovered is it's simply just faster and more efficient to have the Daredevil vault over the Bloodstone, then vault on it again and kill it quickly, and steal back to Xerath. They get a small amount of DPS stacks, or a small amount of Madness stacks, but it's pretty negligible, and the Daredevil will have significantly higher DPS on the boss any second where it's not killing stacks. So even against Xerath and Gorseval, where Ellies seem to be kind of locked in despite the nerfs, have started to see a big reduction in their numbers. The second big change has been the return of DPS Guardian. Guardian as a pure DPS class hasn't been part of the raid meta since its inception, but thanks to Scepter and Sword buffs, it definitely is now. Without doing any kind of full build guide, Guardians have replaced their hammer with Scepter and Torch, with a sword on swap, and replaced Honor with Radiance to focus on pure DPS. Sword and Scepter are roughly equal DPS against small hitboxes, and a Scepter is a bit higher on large hitboxes. On the other hand, Sword provides a bit of Fury and can cleave adds a little bit better than the Scepter. Torch is just there to look cool and do massive DPS. What's the advantage of a DPS Guardian, and why are people using them instead of an Ellie or Thief? Well, against a big hitbox, Guardian is probably just as good as Thief and perhaps a bit worse than Ellie. Plus, Guardian provides some cool utility in the form of heals, Aegis, and CC. Against a small hitbox, Thief is a bit better than Guardian, but Guardian will beat Ellie against a small hitbox provided and still provides a bit of extra CC and utility that the Ellie doesn't. The extra Fury that Sword provides is especially good in comps where you don't want to bring a Revenant for whatever reason. One last consideration is that Scepter is a ranged weapon, which makes it very useful in a few fights like Xerath, Matthias, Gorseval, and Veilguard. Next up is the Pink Moa. For the last few months, Druids didn't really have to think much about which pets to bring: Tiger for Fury and Electric Wyvern for CC. Thanks to some intrepid testers, the community has found out that Pink Moa has stronger CC than the Wyvern against everything but large hitbox bosses, and even then, it requires some RNG for the Wyvern to be better. Keeping it short, most Druids should be switching out their Wyvern for Pink Moas as soon as possible if they haven't already. And the last meta shift that I want to talk about regarding raids is the adoption of Malix instead of Jalis for Revenant on a few bosses. Jalis is of course superior in terms of pure DPS over Malix, no doubt, but Malix is no slouch in the DPS department itself, and it does provide some utility that is quite nice at certain bosses. First up, Malix can rip boons with Banish Enchantment, which can come in handy at Zera if she stands in a Bloodstone and gains Retaliation, Quickness, or Protection, all of which can screw you up. Being able to easily rip 4 boons from her is pretty helpful, especially when you have a group that doesn't really have a lot of Necros. Next up, Pain Absorption. This is the big reason why you see Malix in raids now. Being able to siphon the Condis from your team and grant party-wide resistance with the aid of Mesmer Signet of Inspiration is very strong in certain fights like Matthias and Sloth. A lot of teams use Necromancer in those fights to provide Team Condi Cleanse, and what you see is the reliance of Necro being a bit reduced in those fights thanks to Malix Rev, which allows a potentially higher DPS teammate like a Thief, Staff Ellie, or Guardian, depending on the situation. So that is basically it for today, guys. Hopefully some of this information is new to you guys and helps you out with your raid next time you go in. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below.